I'm going to show you a trick in this video, or rather a new feature that will help you model some of your lures faster. So it turns out that in an alternate dimension, I actually write software. And if I switch over to the Curved Shapes Workbench here, I have showed you in previous videos how to use the curved array to quickly create a lure profile. Now, before I discovered the curved array, I was creating a side profile, I was creating front profiles, many of them, lofting them manually. And this curved array has really changed my workflow. But there's one thing that I didn't like about it, or at least one thing I thought could be improved. I'm going to show you that now. So the first thing is you're going to need to update your Curved Shapes Workbench if you have it already installed. The way to know that it is up to date is if you're in that workbench from the selector, notice there's a Curved Shapes menu and there's an Examples menu. And the Examples menu belongs to this Curved Shape Workbench. So if I was in the Part Workbench or something else, you wouldn't see it, right? Now, if you click on the Examples menu, you're going to see something here called Fishing Lure. Now, let's say you don't see this fishing lure from your examples. You will probably have to go to the Tools and the Add-on Manager. And once that loads, you can check down here to see if there's any updates available. And if you click on that, it'll probably show you the Curved Shapes Workbench has been updated. But if it doesn't show you that, what you can do is type Curved Shapes in here, right? You can select it and you can uninstall it and then you can reinstall it. And when you do that, then you'll get this latest version and you should be able to verify that the fishing lure example shows up. Without this example, you won't have the feature that I've added to the workbench. So the example menu is just a real easy way to see if you're up to date. And this is an example I added to this workbench that shows how this new feature works. And when you click on that example, it runs a script and it creates a document. Now you could save this document. I mean, this is a real FreeCAD document and it shows 5 examples of curved array with and without this feature. So I'm going to hide a few of these so that we can sort of talk about them one by one. So here we have a basic walk the dog lure, right? The original was the Zara Spook. There's many on the market since. Now, before my new feature, if I was to create sketches of the side profile of that lure, right? And I was to just create a simple circle in the front because I'm creating a tubular lure. And then I created a curved array, I would get this shape. And I've talked about this in previous videos. What's happening here is that circle is becoming stretched to match the vertical and horizontal hull curves. Well, in this example, I only have a single hull curve. I have this side profile. I haven't created a top profile. And I showed you in my very first video how to create an exact copy of a side profile if you just want a tubular object like this and rotate it. But with this new feature, you don't have to do that anymore. So let's bring this one in. And this shows what I wanted when I created a curved array with a single hull curve. I wanted that circle to remain circular across the entire dimension, right? Across the entire lure. And I only wanted it to be stretched up and down to match that side profile. So what I've done is I've added a new property to the curved array. So if you have one highlighted and you come down here in the Properties menu and go to the Data tab, you're going to see this PreservedAspectRatio checkbox, and it's either yes or no. And the only difference between these two baits is whether that box is checked. So if I was to take this first one and check that box, you'd see it becomes circular. If I uncheck it, you see it becomes elliptical again. And the width here is determined by the width of this circle. So the circle example isn't a great one. So let's bring back this crankbait example. If I look at it and I have a single side profile here, right? If I look at my properties and my base object is this flat-sided front profile, which is this guy here, looks like that. And I have a side profile that looks like that, right? I'm going to get this elliptical object. And it's flat-sided. And maybe that's what I want. But that's not what I want here. What I want is that shape, just like the circle, to follow the shape of the lure. So this other one here that's shown is following the shape. In other words, it's being stretched. Let's hide these, show the side profile again. That front profile is being stretched vertically to match this, but its aspect ratio is preserved. So you notice that this front profile is taller than it is wide, right? That's a pretty common shape for a bait fish or a lure. So let's hide these sketches again. And let me talk about one more thing. So this preserved aspect ratio true can be very handy, right? In fact, let me just close this. Let me show you how simple this is. Let's just rerun the example. That's going to bring everything visible again. Okay, so this one here with the eye on it, that's the one with the preserved aspect ratio equals true. And this shape might work great for a crankbait, but I actually want it to be a little wider in the front. And so that's what this other crankbait down here is. So when you have a shape, let me put it this way. The very first thing I would do now with this workflow is I would create my side profile, I'd create my front profile, and I'd see how it looked, right? I'd say, oh, I like that. Print it. You know, that's the bait I want. I'm ready to go. But if I want to modify it, I can always go back to using a side and top Hullcurve. So if you noticed here, I'm much thicker at the front than I am with this one. The difference here is that I am actually using two Hullcurves, right? I'm using both a side and a top profile, which I've shown you how to do before. So preserved aspect ratio only works when you have a single Hullcurve. In fact, if you have an object like this with two Hullcurves in it, and you select this preserved aspect ratio, you're probably going to see a warning. Let me do a recompute here. Nope, I don't see the warning. You might see a warning. And if you do see a warning, it's just basically telling you it's getting ignored. This property does not matter if you have a side and top Hullcurve. So if I show you the sketches for that, this is the side profile and the top profile. Let's hide this eye. You can see I've defined this wider top profile in comparison to what we got with the preserved aspect ratio equals true, which is over here. So that's all I wanted to show you about this. And spoiler alert, in the next video, we're actually going to be using this example file to create a bait. But we're going to add a couple of features to it that makes it a really killer fish catcher. So you'll want to check out the next video. Good luck with your lure designs, and I hope you're getting out there and fishing them too.